I thank you for being with us online and in person. We know that some people just want to be in a space to worship, want to be in the sanctuary. And over the next few weeks, although we're encouraging those of us to stay home, we're encouraging that our numbers stay low so that we can create the space for someone who just wants to be kind of in the sanctuary presence. And so we thank you for being here. I just wanted to give a brief introduction of myself this morning. I imagine you might have heard someone in your life say some sort of words like this, and perhaps that someone is yourself. I cannot imagine my life if it wasn't for blank person, right? Or that person came into my life at just the right time. You know, as I say that phrase, I'm imagining that a specific people in your life have immediately popped up into sort of your imagination. To say, this person came into my life at just the right time, or this, if it wasn't for this person, I don't know where I would be today. Perhaps it's a father or mother. Perhaps it's a friend from high school or a friend from college. I don't know what that person is. Or maybe it's just a stranger who spoke a word that gave something to you to allow you to, I don't know, live differently than you would have imagined otherwise. But it's a reality that I think hits all of us, that people matter to us, and they change us. Oftentimes, hopefully for the good too, right? We find ourselves in the midst of a sermon series on being faithful. Not faithful as in doing the right things, but being faithful. Last week we talked about this sort of unshakable faith, that no matter what comes our way, we feel solid and firm in our foundation, that we can move forward, and that we might not know exactly what's going to happen, but we have this sense of assurance in God beyond the measure of the experience we're encountering. And last week we talked about how you ought to find yourself in a place where you can experience practical teaching, whether that's in devotional, or whether that's hopefully with our Sunday morning messages, or whether that's in books. But the point of practical teaching about what it means to follow God is not that you have someone who can make something really relevant or really funny or whatever it is, make you laugh, make you cry, but as much as it helps you live out your faith. Because over and over again, we see as Jesus teaches the people that follow him, his priority is less on their understanding and their belief and more on them putting his words into practice. And so he uses parables that people can understand so that they can implement those words. So that's one thing that helps with this sort of rock solid, faithful faith. And we know some of those people. But today we're going to talk about this other piece in it, one of the 5 catalysts over the series that we're going to talk about, and that is to say, providential relationships. Now, before I go any further, know one thing. You cannot control this, I don't think. While you can put yourself into practical teaching and you can implement the teaching in your everyday life, that's something you can do, right? Obviously, God helps us with that. But providential relationships are not necessarily something you can manufacture yourself. Although, when all of us, any of us who have this sort of faith story, a time when that faith felt really rock solid, or a time when we were growing in our faith, I bet it came with a person along the way. A person probably not too unfamiliar from Philip. Most of the stories of the calling of the disciples begin with Jesus, and he says, "Come and follow me." And I always baffle at these people because all of a sudden they hear the words of this guy that maybe or maybe not they have heard of before named Jesus, and it just seems like they just drop everything and follow him, right? So like, oh, come follow me. The tax collector gets up from his booth, the responsibilities that he probably has, and follows Jesus. The fishermen, they drop their nets and they get up and they follow Jesus. And even Philip gets up to follow Jesus, but he does something a little different than the rest. Because there's something about this Jesus guy, apparently to Philip, that makes him feel like, I got to tell Nathaniel about this. He will miss out on this experience if I do not go and tell him. And friends, I am 100% the Nathaniel in the room, okay? Because what happens to me when someone says, Brian, you can't believe what just happened. I say, yeah, I can believe it didn't happen. I don't know about that. Yeah. And so when someone comes to me and says, hey, Brian, you got to drop everything and follow me. I found the guy that we have been waiting for hundreds and hundreds of years. This guy named Jesus. The prophets talked about him. Moses talked about him. He is the one. And Nathaniel says, yeah, ain't nothing good's coming out of that place that guy came from. I can tell you that much. I can tell you I do not need to go to that restaurant. I already know it's not going to be good. I can tell you that no, I do not like that experience. Some of you who grew up in the South, I'm sorry for this, but I said to myself after going to the South for a camp over the summer, I will never, ever live in the South because nothing good is coming out of the South. Grew up in a Yankee in Minnesota, and I wasn't going to go there. And yet, I found my way at Duke Divinity School, and I tell you what, we were crying on the plane, leaving Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, coming to Hawaii, where we were moving to, because we learned to love the place. I just happened to be the Nathaniel. And perhaps you're Philip, perhaps you're one of the other disciples, and that is awesome. I know that Ashley, when we found out we were moving, my wife Ashley, she says, was that the option to move to Hawaii? In an instant, yes, let's go. Me, on the other hand, I don't know about that. And I remember being like that in high school. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't believe in God. I thought God was something people made up to explain the cosmos, just like the Roman gods that they had come up with. You had Apollos that brought up. Well, we knew Apollos wasn't real anymore, so we had to come up with a broader God. And so that's what I thought Christianity was and all the other major religions were. And so there I was, and many of you have heard this story, but there I was in high school, and I was, what didn't make the hockey team that specific year, and was trying to figure out what to do, because if you play hockey in Minnesota, it is your life in the winter. And so my life was kind of taken away when I didn't make the team, and I was twiddling my thumbs, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then I had a friend, his name was Tom, and he said, why don't you come with me to this thing called Young Life? And I said, I don't know about that, Tom. I don't know about that. I don't want to. That's this Christian thing. It just doesn't sound good to me. Thanks, but no thanks. A few weeks go by. I didn't go. I found myself bored because I wouldn't have something to do. You can only play so many video games, and homework was homework. And so eventually he invited me, and I came with him. And I don't know what about it was, but I certainly know there's this other person that was there, and his name was Chuck, and he was the Young Life leader. And he was just so excited to see me. He knew me because I ran on the cross-country team, and he would come to the meets because he had some other friends that would join for Young Life there. And so he already knew me by name when I showed up at Young Life. He goes, Brian, it is so good to see you. And I just felt welcome in that space. And there was something about that Christian community that began to teach me that the story of Christianity wasn't about how God made everything and the details of what's going to happen when you die, but it was really about this story of love, and as we talked about a few weeks ago, of invitation to Christ's table and fostering Christian community together. That's the story that God invites us into, and it was a story I was welcome to because I was willing to say yes to that person who said, come and see. I don't think it was the intention of that person to save me or to convert me or whatever words you're going to say. His intention was to be a friend of me. He wasn't even necessarily trying to preach the gospel to me. He just knew I could use Christian community. And so he invited me with him. If you're a person of faith, I wonder who in your life has been that person that has helped change you. The thing is, sometimes it's that person like Philip, right? Your friend knows you, who wants to convince, wants just the best for your life, and you know that, but even still, you're kind of like, yeah, but I don't think I should go to that school or take this job or whatever advice that person's giving you. And eventually, you come around, and they help you. So it might be that person, or it might be someone that's kind of out of the blue. Like I said, I'm like Nathaniel, right? I've already made that clear. And so I spend this time with you all up front, right? But if I'm in a crowd, I like to blend in, right? And I don't like to be noticed, and I don't like people to ask me about what it means to be a pastor, if my job is even full-time, or whatever it is that they ask. So I was at this wedding, and I was there at this wedding, and it was kind of easier back when I was in North Carolina because I had to wear a robe at the weddings. And so not only were they kind of surprised that I wore a robe, but, like, because I was younger, so you look young to be a pastor, right? I got that whole deal during the service, but I was back, and the congregation gathered for the wedding robe there. But I went to the reception afterwards, and I, of course, changed out of my robe because that would be super weird to wear my robe to the reception. And so got in normal wedding attire, and I don't know how it happened. Maybe it's because got placed at the young adult table, and they just weren't paying attention to the person speaking. They didn't recognize me at the table. I was clutch. I was like, they're not going to ask me about what it means to be a pastor, and they're not going to do these things. But then finally it came around to say, well, how do you know the couple, right? And then, I know them through the church, and then eventually it led to, oh, you're the guy that was up front, right? You're the guy that was up front. And I tell this to you because you don't know when you will be a providential person, and you can't create that. In fact, I try to push it off because I didn't necessarily see myself wanting to be a pastor growing up or even when I was in graduate school. And so I kind of hesitated to that role that people would put me in because it comes with all these sort of categories they have. And of course, one of the categories at that table came up. Of course, one of the categories, this girl says, what do you think about homosexuality? And this is a question you just do not want to hear at a table. What do you want to do? It's just that's the reason you don't want someone, because they ask some awkward biblical question that's potentially contentious and all these things. And I was just tired of okay, I don't know where this person is coming from. I don't know what they're going to say. I'm just going to speak my mind, and we'll go from here. And I say, I think it's something that we ought to celebrate because it's a unique way in which that person has been called to be a child of God. And in that moment, the girl looks at me and she says, I have never heard a Christian say I was a child of God or worthy, let alone a pastor. And it was in that moment that I realized God had called me to be a providential relationship for this person, even though it was simply a word that was spoken of honesty. That's it. Because this is the other thing, friends. You will not know when God will call upon you to be a providential person in someone else's life. You won't. My friend Tom didn't know that he was going to be a providential person in my life, later on be the best man in my wedding, because he simply asked me to go to Young Life. My Young Life leader, Chuck, didn't know he would be a providential person in my life that would eventually be one of the reasons I follow into ministry, simply by knowing my name when I showed up to that meeting. Donna, my field education director, when I was a Duke Divinity intern, didn't know that she was going to be a providential person just by allowing me to try to use my skill sets in the context of a local church and learning that I actually loved it. And I'm sure just like you, those providential people in your lives that said, come and see, come to church with me, or hey, check this out, come to this small group, may have changed your life. They may never have known it or never intended to do it. I don't believe life change happens by telling people what to believe. So, the people down in Waikiki that have the sign that says, you must repent, right? And they got the big megaphone outside across from the zoo. Yeah, you're nodding. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen them before. I don't think they're going to really change lives that often. I think that life change happens within the context of meaningful relationships. So we cannot control when we are going to be a providential person in someone else's life. We cannot control when someone else is going to be providential in our life and in our faith journey and in this journey. But we can be willing, friends. Because as I sat around that table, a table in which I wished to be like hide and to not be seen and just kind of like go there, I also realized at the end of that conversation, perhaps being known as a pastor is okay because it allows me to be a pastor that they have never experienced before. One that can be hope and joy. Also realized that sometimes my small group in college, they would try to convince me to do this. Brian, it's going to be a good idea. Remember, I'm Nathaniel. I'm like, nah, guys, I don't know about that. Perhaps sometimes when someone says, come and see, stop being Nathaniel for a little bit. Because imagine the things Nathaniel would have missed out on in his life had he kept saying, I don't know about that. Nothing good's going to come from that. I don't think so. And imagine where Nathaniel will be had Philip just not invited him. We cannot control it, but there's some things we can do. You can invite someone into a relationship. Even now, during COVID, you can invite someone into a meaningful relationship. Even now, during COVID, you can say, hey, come check out our church. We're a church Ohana. That can happen. You can say, hey, come get coffee with me. You could start a dinner group, a small group at the church. We're going to be starting those back up hopefully soon once this peak goes down for in-person. You could be part of that. You could be a leader in that. You could join that group. You could email us for either if you're interested. Because that will put yourself in a situation of a relationship. Because as much as this is great, and I think that God speaks to us through word, I hope God speaks to us through the words that are meditating, right? I know it must be followed by what if life change is going to happen? Meaningful relationships. Start a group, join a group, invite someone to be part of your life. Or listen to that person that's been inviting you to be part of theirs. It's been saying, hey, why don't you join my Bible study? Or hey, why don't you do this? It's not about what you'll learn. It's about the friends you'll make. Meaningful relationship can be prioritized in our lives, especially relationships that we call Christian fellowship. I have lots of great friends, and they've shaped my life, and yet still I kind of go back to some of these hallmarks. In high school, I had a Bible study. In college, I had a small group. Divinity school, I had my friend group, and just all we talked about was the Bible and theology, so kind of was a small group. And then beyond, I've tried to put myself in groups, whether it's colleagues or small groups, that allow me to build those relationships. Because I can guarantee you, you can list those people off in your mind that you would not be the same had it not been for them. Because God uses people to change our lives. And here's the last thing. Celebrate it when it happens, right? Celebrate those people. I know certainly that's one of the things we're going to do later today. I got a random call from a Duke Divinity field education director saying, hey, come and see. I got this student that's interested in coming to Hawaii. It's in the middle of COVID. We're just opening things back up. We got things going on this summer. I don't know about that, Nathaniel. We said yes. Church council said yes. Others said yes. And we got the gift of D. Nicole, who those of you who have met know that she just adds life to your life. Even though it was for 10 weeks, it's been a gift just to say yes and to get to know her and to build that relationship. So we celebrate the relationship when it happens. Write a letter to the friend that, was back in high school, or to the mentor in college, or to your mom or your dad if they're the ones, right? Or auntie and uncle. Send them an email, send them a text, make a Facebook post about them. Celebrate the way they changed your life, because honestly, sometimes they may not think they played that pivotal role in your life, right? They're just being them. They might have no idea that they were the catalysts for this in your life. But isn't that the sort of life that we want to live? To be catalysts for others in their faith journey? To help them know and believe and live out that they are children, beloved, created by God? Welcomed and invited to the table. As we sang in the song, for everyone born, a seat at the table, but so many don't know it, believe it, or they think quite the opposite because the Christians they've encountered. So let's be the people that say, come and see that the Lord is good, that God has created a seat for you at the table. Let's be people that start a group, join a group, invite people into relationship. Let's be a catalyst for someone's faith journey. Because I promise you, there's nothing like that feeling when someone says to you, those words changed me. Your relationship has changed me. And if you get to be that privilege of God's gift in someone's life, that's a gift you'll cherish. And anyone who has that rock solid faith that we have talked about has had those people. So let's go find those people, find those relationships. Let's go be those people in the world. I invite you to pray with me. Gracious and loving God, we know that you work in mysterious ways. And somehow, sometimes, even when we resist, even when we are like Nathaniel, even when we say we're not sure about that, nothing good can come from there. You can't really use me. You know me. Somehow you do it. Somehow there's those relationships that are the right place at the right time that grow to be these foundational components of our character, of our journey with you. And sometimes it could be simply as something that reminds a person that they are of sacred worth and that we need them in our lives. And then those of us who have had those people, which I imagine most of us have, can turn back and say, I needed you. You were pivotal in my faith journey, in my journey to what it means to be who I am now and who I want to be in the future. And so we give thanks for those people. And put us in those pivotal relationships. Give us those people anew in our lives. Help us be those people for others. And change us. Amen.